Hi, everybody. I am Sonya Bohmann, the Executive Director of the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention, and this is Above and Below, our podcast. Today, I am joined by some special guests, but as always, I have my partner, Zulq, to share his insights as well. So let's go around and do some introductions, starting with Zulq, and then we'll meet the rest of our guests.
Partner has so many meanings, Sonya. Partner in crime.
Yes. Well, I didn't want to use the word crime today.
Okay, we'll use crime. I'm her partner in the cause here.
Yes.
My name is Zulq Malik. I'm the co-host. I'm also one of the board members at CISP. Happy to be here today and looking forward to having a really awesome conversation with Scott, Greg, and Hayley as well.
Awesome. Hayley, why don't you introduce yourself for us, please?
Absolutely. My name is Hayley Emerson. I am the National Fundraising Event Specialist for Stop Soldier Suicide. I work closely with Scott and Greg on a charity golf tournament, and I'm really excited to have this conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. Scott, you are the impetus for this whole conversation, so go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Sonya. My name is Scott Wiesner. I am the founder and CEO of C2MS, and we are a safety management company. We also are very interested as our corporate outreach, suicide prevention, and particularly as it applies to our veteran community. And we're excited to partner with CIASP as well as Stop Soldier Suicide to advance the cause here and prevent veterans from taking suicide and others in the construction industry.
Awesome. Thank you. And Greg, last but not least.
Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Wiesner. I'm a Director of Engineering and Innovation at QTS Data Centers. Prior to hopping into the civilian world, I spent 10 years as an infantry officer in the Army.
Awesome. Thank you. That reminds me, I do want to just give a little bit of a disclaimer before we enter into this conversation. We are, as always, going to talk about suicide prevention in the construction industry. This conversation, though, might go a little deeper for some. We're going to talk about veterans and how that applies to this conversation and how they fit into the construction workforce and some rates around suicide in the veteran workforce as well. As always, if this conversation feels too heavy for you, please feel free to tap out. Remember that you have resources at your fingertips, including 988. So let's go ahead and kick things off. I know that Greg touched a little bit on his service, and Scott, we'd like to hear about yours, but also thank you for that service. We appreciate all that you've done for us. So why don't you guys go ahead and share a little bit about that so that we can get some context around why we're having this conversation.
Absolutely. Again, Scott Wiesner, I'm a retired colonel. I served in the Army for 28 years. I was an artilleryman. And one of the great honors in my life was being a battalion commander in Alaska. And we were called to duty to serve in Iraq in 2005 and 6. What made our deployment very, very unique was after the first year, the president decided to send us to Baghdad as part of the first surge. And our soldiers, again, very significant advance. We had already sent home about 50 soldiers from our battalion. And now we were called to basically re-up and rearm and go down to Baghdad into a very significant bad area. Republican Guard held area in Iraq. And so for those next 4.5 months down in Baghdad, combat operations were very, very heavy. Our guys hit over 250 IEDs and combined attacks during that time period, suicide car bombs, all the various things that we had to deal with. But my soldiers performed in an unbelievable manner. I could go story after story about what they did, especially as an artilleryman serving as infantry. And I always get on my son, Greg. He's an infantryman. But I say infantry is so easy, even an artilleryman can do it. But at the end of the day, my soldiers performed in an amazing manner. And we were very, very fortunate. Given all those attacks and all those incidents, we were able to bring everybody home at that point in time. And I think that took us, that was just a miracle in and of itself. But really, the thing that drives us why we're here today is since that time, I've lost 4 to suicide. Or died by suicide. And again, those soldiers, as a battalion commander, it kills me that I couldn't be there for them to help them once they all left. So again, Greg and I have a very powerful story as to why we're here and what we've done. So I kind of turn it over to Greg, and he can share his stories of combat and why we're here.
Thanks for sharing that, Scott. And I'm so sorry for your losses. Greg.
Yeah, so I commissioned as infantry officer in 2013. One of my first deployment in 2014. Came back on my last one in 2020. The redeployment for me was really interesting and really unique, because the day that we were getting on the C-17s to fly out of Afghanistan was the day that the world shut down for COVID. So really, really weird redeployment back into to normal life. We had to go into a period where guys were literally quarantined out in the woods for the first 2 weeks of their return home. Unfortunate situation. I ended up taking over a company in 3rd Brigade, 82nd, and as I took over, and most people know, if you're familiar from a veteran standpoint, most commanders will do what's called a command climate survey. I did a survey and found that at least a quarter of my guys had thought of or had known somebody that had thought of suicide. So it kind of led me to take a few actions. Unfortunately, though, the stress of that environment kind of caused a few of my guys, 2 of my soldiers, to die by suicide. And the really significant portion of it was, one of them happened to be my executive officer, which was kind of a non-standard event for us in the military community. It drew a ton of attention to the company itself, and fortunate that we were able to bring some resources down to the company, and we had a ton of guys actually sign up and go get help. So we were able to break down some of the stigma that naturally exists surrounding outreach and asking for help. But it's the whole reason why we're here today. Austin's parents really wanted to kind of discuss what that event was like for them and how traumatic it was for them, and give back to the military community. They actually had a couple of lessons that they talked to our entire battalion, and really where that manifest was their partnership with Stop Soldier Suicide. So they evaluate a whole bunch of different VEOs and kind of came to Stop Soldier Suicide as the top one, the most promising from a care perspective. And when they partnered, I partnered. We've been here since. We've managed to hold 3 charity fundraising events in partnership with my company QTS and Stop Soldier Suicide, and so far we've raised over $500,000 for the organization.
That's incredible. And thank you for sharing that story. This conversation really is about the intersection between veterans and construction workers. And I want to hear a little bit about what Stop Soldier Suicide is doing. And then we can kind of dig a little deeper in that, because it sounds like from conversations that I've gotten to have with both Scott and Greg that you both sort of landed in construction as civilians. And so let's hear from Hayley, and then I want to explore that a little bit if we can.
Absolutely. So just to give a little bit of background on Stop Soldier Suicide, Stop Soldier Suicide is the only national nonprofit that focuses solely on ending the suicide crisis among service members and veterans. Veterans and service members are 58% more likely to die by suicide than civilian counterparts. And so we know that it's an incredibly large issue. And so through our high touch, high care clinical care model, it's called Roger, we are able to meet those veterans and service members where they're at before suicide becomes the ultimate plan. And so we're really proud of our care model. And kind of speaking a little bit, I won't go too much into it. That will be Scott and Greg. But construction is one of the top post-service careers for veterans. 15% of veterans enter the construction industry after service, making it the second highest post-service industry. So wow. We know that it's a natural fit. And Stop Soldier Suicide is there whether you're an active duty service member or a veteran. We don't discriminate based on length of service or branch or any discharge status. We'll come one, come all, we'll make sure to take care of you. So we're really proud of our clinical care model and kind of what we're doing to both help veterans and service members.
Thank you. That's amazing. Just for sort of a level set as well, about 7% of the construction industry is made up of veterans also. So just kind of thinking about where that fits into our model when we think about the risk factors that go with being a construction worker from a suicide standpoint, add into that the risk factors that go with veterans and the amount of our workforce, it really does become exponential.
And maybe, Sonya, we can address the issue. 7% might seem like a small number, but when you take a look at the net number of humans that are engaged in construction, 7% is actually into the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Right?
Yeah,
that's very important to know, is that 7%, while on the big scheme of things seems like, 7%, good 93 is okay. The 7% of 1.7 million people is a big number.
Absolutely.
Right?
Great point, Zulq. Absolutely there.
Having the construction background, Scott, I know you're on the safety side. Greg, we had an earlier conversation. You're adjacent to construction, but you're heavily engaged with people that are part of the active duty. What do you think naturally attracts people from the services to join construction?
I think it's pretty natural. I think when you're in the military, you establish a discipline of action. You have to get up at a certain time. You have to be at a certain place at a certain time. You have to be prepared. You've got to have all your equipment, all those different things. And it makes really for a very smooth transition, we think, into the construction industry, because you have discipline. You have to have there's a chain of command. You report to your foreman, you report to your superintendent, you've got your project managers all there. So the culture is very, very, similar. And from a safety standpoint, you're in the military, there's a way that you attack a building, and Greg and I both know what it's like to go in, armed into a building. Well, you do this kind of the same thought process in construction, right? When you do an electrical box, you do it the same way every single time. And all those different procedures, manifest themselves in that discipline process, and particularly in terms of safety and how you do things day in, day out.
And for someone who's had a construction, sorry, Greg, we'll get to you in a second. For someone who's had a construction, I actually appreciate the discipline that the services bring forward to our industry, because in a lot of instances, yes, the chain of command is very important. Responsibility at being punctual, super important. We're not a site that can start whenever you feel like starting. There are set hours, and people are dependent on each other. And knowing what I have very limited knowledge of being in the services. My grandfather served, and I only had a couple uncles, and I had two uncles that were U.S. Army Corps engineers. But the reliance on each other is very paramount, and that's something that you don't learn when you're at school, because they teach you about individualism. When you get to university, it's a little bit more individualist, a little bit group, but the military really prepares you to say, hey, I'm an essential member of the entire component system. So we really appreciate that side of it all. And Greg, do you have any take on why we naturally attract people from construction, from the industry?
Yeah, I think, at times it's as simple as veterans are used to being active and doing stuff with their hands, right? Like whether you're an infantryman working on a machine gun, or you're an artilleryman, firing around downrange. They don't necessarily want to be stuck sitting behind a desk doing things. So it's naturally attractive for them to go into an industry like this, where they can see, tangible results of them actually going in and creating something, whether it's, whatever part of the construction industry that they're in. But it's a lot of people kind of unified against a central effort, and it's extremely similar to kind of how we do things in the military, right? It's a lot of people unified against a central effort, and naturally it's a way for them to go in and continue to kind of refine and work those trade-like skills that they've developed throughout their time in the military.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Currently, we have a gap of roughly 500,000 workers that we need in construction to help fulfill the work that we currently have on hand in the next 12 to 18 months. So knowing that we bring a lot of discipline from what you guys are doing in the military, what are some of the things that you could suggest that will help employers so that when we do get these veterans joining our workforces, how do we contend with some of the other side that we don't get to see, that that happens in their brains, it happens at after hours? It's not necessarily on the job site, but just transposed to the job site, without calling them demons, Scott.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And if I was going to do one thing today, and if we had, in addition to introducing Stop Soldier Suicide as an additional resource for veterans in the construction industry, the next thing is, Greg and I are committed right now through Sonya and yourself and the efforts that you guys are making we want to educate business owners and those others in the construction industry that, hey, when you're dealing with a veteran, it's not business as usual. You have to ask them what their experiences are and what have they done and what is their background, because every single veteran is not the same. And when you look at the risk factors of being in construction and then also being a veteran, you have 120% more likely to take your life than someone who just shows up, and that's their first job. So we want people to be really cognizant of that. And I want to share my personal story myself, right? When you're involved in combat for almost 17 straight months, it changes who you are, what you deal with. And my son knows there's days when, the demons have come out and he's seen that, right? And I had PTSD and I went to go see counselors. So I run a company. I'm a businessman, right? I think I'm moderately successful, but at the same time, I had to deal with something, and to a degree now I still do. It changes you, and you have to continually beat that demon down. So getting counseling, seeking help, all those things is not a weakness. It is a strength, and to understand that your family and everyone else is depending on you to go do those things. And again, when you see maybe, someone on the job site who is a veteran who is getting angry or other things like this, these are things that, ultimately are signs that there are things, brewing behind the scenes. So, I know like there's a big, total human health initiatives across the industry. Worker well-being is one of them, and part of that is understanding who your workers are and what problems that they have at home. And it could be something with their kid, or it could be something internally right now that they're dealing with from their military background and experience. But you have to ask and you have to engage, and that's why we're here today.
So you bring up a really good question. Or a really good point, I should say, is that we have to engage and we have to ask those questions. But I would bet that the majority of our listeners that are in that position of being the person who has to ask the question has no idea how to do it and is probably scared to death to do it, no pun intended, because they don't want to activate someone's PTSD, or they don't want to make the problem worse. What does the conversation sound like then?
So I think I'll touch on that, and kind of jumping back to the earlier question, kind of as I came to QTS, I was fortunate enough within my first about 6 months here to take over our veterans program and help lead that. And two of the things that we've kind of really emphasized first is education. I think that when I got out of the military, I knew I was probably more at risk to suicide than others. I didn't know the statistics surrounding it of 58% more at risk. Like, that's a staggering number. Mm-hmm. So education, I think, is where we generally start with this topic. Second is the communication piece, right? We've had a lot of conversations internally. We've invited Stop Soldier Suicide in to have kind of some of these case study conversations to really deep dive into what is it that's potentially causing these? What are the factors that, to look for from a manager standpoint? How do we tailor these conversations? And on the conversation piece as well, I would highly suggest, especially in organizations that are massive, that employ a ton of veterans, if there's not some type of standing veterans program internally, that you can have veteran advocates lead, I highly suggest it, because there are people that are willing to be open and have these conversations and help others that don't have the tribal knowledge of what it was like to help lead them. So building that partnership, I think, is paramount for developing a better understanding and developing a better method of communication. I'd say most veterans are generally open to having some of those conversations about what their service was like. They don't necessarily need to come in with extremely pointed questions on certain things, and it's a conversation at the end of the day, right? It's hey, how are you doing today? Like, what's going on in your life? Like, how are things at home? How's the transition been for you? A lot of people, as Hayley, I'm sure, can talk to, one of the most dangerous times for a veteran is the transition period. So your new hires into the construction industry, that this is their first step into civilian life and civilian workforce. that's a very challenging time for any veteran coming in. So those are the people that I think that you can initiate some of those conversations with, and you're not going to have the answers. Like none of us do, but at least having that conversation really opens up the door and says that, hey, I'm here. Like we can talk, and acknowledging that I'm not a clinician, but I can help at least guide you to people that can get you support. That's a powerful thing for a lot of people in the industry.
So, Chris, you touched on a really good point about having a program. Larger companies have these opportunities. 95% of the construction ecosystem is made up of small and medium enterprises. So I'm going to ask a very personal question. First of all, Scott, it takes a lot. Not only did you serve, but you allowed your children to join in the service, and you knew, and then you let your. How does Scott, a dad, talk to his son? Say, "Hey, son, how are you doing today?" Because a lot of business owners feel like they become surrogate parents, surrogate big brothers or sisters. They take on these roles, and small, medium enterprises need to know what that personal touch is from a dad like yourself, Scott. So how do you check in on your children?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, one of the things was when Greg came back from Afghanistan and then assumed command, the big, we talk consistently. We talk about, what his experiences were, how he was feeling, and things like that. But I think the biggest thing, that we were able to do together was try to formulate a plan when he came back, and when almost 25% of his company either had suicide ideation, and that they weren't getting the help that they needed, and that they were kind of being isolated and like, hey, suck it up was the attitude. And that attitude was not, so we talk about, hey, is anything bothering you, or the things, how are you feeling? Are you, what are the things you're feeling? We knew we had to do something, and he, was able to get resources down from the 82nd Division and get everybody. To his credit, every single soldier in his unit went through and they were asked if they needed help. And that is, and again, for me, is just to continue to engage with him, talk to him. How are you doing? How you feeling? And things like that. But I think I also heard a stat that 11% of the construction companies are owned by veterans, right? So if that is the case, there's no excuse why those owners are not talking to the soldiers. And I think Greg is right. His company committed to a veterans organization. Greg is the president of Vets for QTS, which enables him to pull almost, QTS is made up of 25% of the veterans. So those, and bringing people together and doing, having meetings and talking about this openly, I think is the key. So again, it's a different population. And if we can get those construction companies to take, why don't we have a separate group that focuses just on veterans? And a lot of times when you get in there and people start talking, then you realize what's going on. And I think that's the key as we go forward. I know that's a little bit out of me talking with Greg, but
No. That's what we want, because the reality is you're not, I like to say you guys are unique, father-son situation, but you're not unique. I'm sure there's more. There's more of you in the construction industry. So you talked about this veterans program. Do you guys have any tips or resources where people can, as a starting point, because as an employer, sometimes I'm overwhelmed with trying to collect money, trying to hire people, get the schedule done. And when somebody says, hey, go create another program because you can talk to your people, they're like, dude, I just want to talk to myself for 2 minutes.
I feel like that's where Hayley fits into this conversation.
Yeah,
right?
well,
how to stop soldier suicide.
Yeah. How
Bring
do
that
we put those
conversation out of
resources
that.
into their hands? Like, how do we say, hey, here's your starter kit.
Mm-hmm.
Take it and go forward and flourish.
Yeah.
And how do we help you guys propagate those kits and it becomes part of a resource in CISB?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing to know is that it doesn't have to be a, $100,000 ERG, right? It doesn't have to be something huge. It can be, you could have a veteran that is open, is well respected within the job site, well respected within the company. And you can go to them and say, hey, would you be interested in kind of hosting a monthly peer group?
Sure.
And then of course you have a ton of veteran organizations that have free resources on their website. I know specifically Stop Soldier Suicide, we have a mental health toolkit, and that really is focused on the workplace. So it says different phrases that you should avoid in your workplace, killing two birds with one stone, things that you would never, ever think about, and things that you can look at this toolkit and say, okay, I don't have all the answers, but I know that I can start, I have a starting point. And just how to have those mental health conversations in the workplace, no matter what industry you're in, there's mental health. Everybody deals with mental health, right? It's not a work problem, it's a health problem. And you wouldn't feel stigmatized going to your boss asking for a day off to go to a primary care doctor appointment. So it should be the same for a therapy appointment. So I think it's just creating that culture of openness and communication. Like I said, there's plenty of veteran organizations like Stop Soldier Suicide, like the Red, White, and Blue Project, like the VA, that you can go to and just simply ask, where do I go? How do I support my employees? And there are plenty of free resources on that. And I can make our mental health toolkit available as well. So
that'd be awesome. If you can give the small, medium enterprises that kit as a starting point, it could grow. It's very hard for the small, medium enterprise employers to say, increase your bandwidth and do something new when they're already constrained for time and effort and energy.
Yeah. And you never know who you're going to help. Maybe the person that you ask to start up this peer support group, this ERG, maybe they're struggling themselves and they don't realize it. I think oftentimes that a lot of people wait until they're in crisis to get help. And if we can meet them before they even are in a crisis, I think that, that sets a good foundation for whether it be a large company or those small, medium enterprises.
One thing I would add too as well, and I think one of the reasons that I attribute us to being successful with our veterans program here at QTS is we have executive backing and sponsorship here. They recognize that the service that we had and that we also benefit the organization. Like I'm sure there's a million success stories in the construction industry of newly hired veterans that come in that crush it in whatever role that they're hired. But just knowing that you've got executives that are looking out, really enables people to step up and be like, you know what, I can help lead this organization or program, or just something as simple as, look, I'll be the guy that distributes a mental health toolkit from Stop Soldier Suicide. Like it could be just as simple as that. It doesn't have to be a ton of extra time and attention, but just knowing that people are thinking of it is also very impactful.
So Zulq mentioned that gap in the workforce, and it made me think that making sure that you are promoting the fact that you have those options, maybe actually something that'll help close that gap in some ways too, is saying that we support veterans in our workforce, we actually encourage it, and here's some of the things that we're doing to support it.
I mean, as an executive, or at least a semi-retired executive from the construction space, there's untapped resources that sometimes we try to say, hey, how do I go find that golden egg? And how do I find the goose that lays the golden egg? There's a goose that lays a lot of golden eggs, and they create all these great servicemen that will retire from the services, and they'll be available to enter our workforce. And if we can, as an industry, as an ecosystem, take one step forward to them, there's a huge probability that we're going to attract the right talent. And when we bring the right talent in, if we nurture that talent, they're going to reach out and bring more of them in, because it's a safe space. And the one thing I did learn, I had a cousin of mine who did active service in the military, not in the American military, but another country. When he passed on, his former major and all his subordinate staff were all there, and they were crying. And I was just like, you guys are grown men. Like, what's going on here? And they said, you don't understand. Like, when we serve together, we literally serve like a family. We share tents, we share meals, we share opportunities, we share pleasure. We share everything together. And when one of us is gone, it's broken. And it's very hard for I'm a civilian. I've always been a civilian. The reality is that I didn't have that specific discipline for chain of command, but I do have discipline. And what I didn't realize was the familyhood that it creates by serving together. And what you guys are is part of a really big family. And when your actual troop or your infantry and all that, you're local families. So there's a real opportunity for construction companies to say, hey, I can easily get resources from a website. I can create this little subculture, and now I can start to attract better people into my organization. I know we're going to be pressed for time, but I do want to talk about one thing, Scott, Greg.
Yeah.
One thing that we never touch upon is the impacts of taking narcotics, alcohol, substance abuse is general.
The intersection. Sure.
The intersection. And, could you guys speak to some of the some of the tricks that you may have, or some of the tips you may have to recognize VAs that may actually have a substance abuse problem, and we know how to get them help, but really recognizing those, because sometimes they get masked into their persona and their character.
Well, go ahead, Greg.
I think Hayley might have, if you want to start, Hayley, I'll kind of add too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Stop Soldier Suicide focuses solely on the suicidality, but we know that suicide is not an isolating issue. Suicide doesn't happen just out of thin air. There are a combination of risk factors, one of those risk factors being drugs and alcohol. So really what we do in our clinical care model that I think can be applied, to the business, is we really look at those crisis response planning and those risk factors. So somebody comes into our care and we say, okay, what is driving these thoughts, right? What are your external factors? Is it finances? Is it homelessness? Is it family issues? And so I think that, by learning what those external factors are, we can really kind of determine the root cause and get to it before the issue becomes suicidality. So applying that to the business model, you see somebody that maybe is acting a little bit different. Maybe they're quieter. They could become louder. You start to notice those tiny little shifts in those personalities. And then I think, again, just like going back to having that open culture of honesty, creating that culture of communication, sitting them down and saying, hey, there's not a problem. There's no problems right now, but I just want to talk to you. Like, are you doing okay? And maybe by digging a little bit into their external life, you can kind of get to the root cause of that issue without bringing up, are you doing drugs? Are you drinking? Things like that. And obviously, drugs and alcohol would create a safety issue in the construction industry. So it's definitely something that needs to be kind of nipped in the bud. But I think by just having that open conversation, and we don't have exact data on, what percentage of, substance abuse and alcohol leads to suicide, but we know that it's an external factor for sure.
I will add to that. When we came back, my brigade had the highest suicide rate in the Army since Vietnam. We lost 8 soldiers in 8 months. And in every instance, alcohol was involved or a different substance. I think the military naturally relies on alcohol as a coping mechanism. I went through this as well, and it took kind of some efforts from my wife to point me in the right direction. And I went and started getting help for that. And then that turned into really a sounding board, because I shortly afterwards lost my 2 soldiers, and I realized, I needed to be there throughout those incidents, to make sure that I was okay and I was right in order to help other people. So it can be very difficult to diagnose, but again, it kind of goes back to what Hayley said, right? It's like, what are the things, what are the small factors kind of going on within that person's life that could potentially be compounding and pushing them towards that direction to abusing, different substances. So it always starts with a conversation, and you can always start very small. We say here all the time, don't try to eat the elephant in one bite, right? It's always a chip away at things, especially from a business standpoint. You don't have to come in with sweeping change immediately, but a lot of ways to kind of start evaluating people and kind of getting guys the support they need.
And I'd like to wrap up with, maybe, if this is we're close to the end here, but I Stop Soldier Suicide, Veterans Crisis Hotline does an amazing job. They I think 1 million plus calls a year, and again they do an amazing job of getting the resources out to folks. But again, Stop Soldier Suicide is another resource that people don't know about, and their average engagement, I think, right now is somewhere between 3 months and 3 years. And one of the great things, they've had over 7,000 engagements with no one committing suicide. So that success rate is absolutely amazing, and something that, again, they have, I think from a clinical perspective, Stop Soldier Suicide has gotten down to where, the nitty gritty, and where the to be able to help folks to, the point where they're 100% success rate. So, we want to get that word out as we move forward. Awesome.
Hayley, where do they access those resources at?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is stopsoldiersuicide.org. We've got plenty of free resources, and then I can have my email available as well. And we're more than happy to help companies, small, medium, large, with where to start and just where to get those resources. And there's plenty of other veteran organizations out there that can have resources as well. So
awesome. So Zulq, are you ready for the final question? You want to ask it this time?
Do I get to? Okay, great. So one of the things that we've done, it was at the behest of our fearless leader here, Sonya, is that we have a word of the year that helps reflect of who we are, and I guess really helps us center ourselves some days.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're going to spring this on you. We're going to start with Hayley because we'll make it easy, and then we'll let Sonya share hers, and then we'll go around the room here really quickly. So word of the year, Hayley, that sets you focused for the year.
I think my word of the year is connection, whether that be, big, small, and everybody needs a little bit of connection. So that's my word of the year, focusing on making those connections.
I love
Awesome.
it.
I'm going to let our guest go first. So I'm going to pass it to Scott and have him go next, please.
Yeah, I would say my word of the year is committed. Greg and I are committed to make a difference in this veteran community, and through Stop Soldier Suicide, through our golf tournament, to be able to raise those monies so that we can get that absolute critical care to veterans who need and call in. We are also committed to our current construction workforce and leadership that's out there to get the word out, to know that, listen, you have veterans in your organizations. They need help. They need additional help. They are 120% more likely to die by suicide than just even a normal worker who's out there for the first day. So we want to continue to engage and get folks aware. And again, we're committed to doing whatever we have to do to get the word out to everybody.
Awesome.
And finally, Greg.
Mine's communication. So our CEOs always talk, you can't fix anything you don't talk about. So communication doesn't take much. It's not something that costs you anything. So continue to communicate, and I think that's how we can solve a lot of problems.
Don't tell my wife, Greg.
Zulq, do you want to share yours?
Yeah, mine is gratefulness. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I'm the son of an immigrant. I live a pretty awesome life, and awesome doesn't have to be monetarily. I have a beautiful daughter who everyone has a mountain to climb. That was my mountain, to become a dad. So I wake up every day going, hey, I'm awake. It's a good day, and it can't get any worse than where it is. So I'm grateful for everything, and I'm actually grateful to be part of this podcast and getting an opportunity to meet all of you. And if, from my perspective, if we can influence one life, I think it was a great day. My challenge is obviously beyond one. So I'm just grateful that we're all here together. And I know what Sonya's is. I'll let her share it.
So mine is intentionality, and that we make intentional connections, commitments, and have intentional communication, because it's really how we will move this mission forward. So just like Zulq, I am grateful that we had the chance to talk today and that this serendipitously came together. And thank you for your service. And thank you, Hayley, for what you do and how it aligns with what we do. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.